So thank you everyone for joining us for a webinar today on protecting your small business from ransomware. I'm Jackie Listow from Cynch Security, and we're really pleased to have this webinar with you today. So ransomware is a lucrative business costing Australians more than 241 million last year. We hear about it in the news all the time, companies like Lime Beverages, Jack Daniels, Carnival Cruises, and the latest one, Travelex, falling victim to ransomware attacks. So during this webinar, we're going to share information about why organizations large and small need to be aware of ransomware, the impacts it can have, as well as the advice on what small businesses can do to protect themselves against this business-crippling threat. This builds on the guidance that we've shared on our latest blog on ransomware that you can find on our website. And please feel free to ask your questions during the session. The presentation will be around half an hour, and we'll leave plenty of time at the end for any of your questions. This session is going to be recorded, as Adam mentioned before, and we'll be uploading it to our Cynch Security YouTube channel after today. So now I'd like to introduce you to Adam Selwood, our CTO and co-founder of Cynch Security.
Thanks, Jackie. And yeah, just as Jackie mentioned, we are recording. So yeah, feel free, and we would encourage you to kind of put yourself on mute unless there's something that you wanted to ask specifically. Feel free to turn your camera off if you'd like. And if you've got any questions, just throw them in the chat. We'll make sure that we pick them up towards the back end of the session. Or if it's particularly interesting, Jackie will interject and we'll go down a little bit of a rabbit hole in the during the session as well. So today, what we're going to cover off is all about ransomware. So everything you need to know about it from a small business perspective. We'll sort of highlight who is at risk. You know, what sort of businesses are ransomware providers or ransomware, sorry, attackers targeting. Give you a bit of a rundown of how it all works. So how does ransomware get into a business in the first place, and what happens after that, and how do those things function? To take you through a bunch of steps and things that you can do within a business to protect yourself and or prepare and be ready if an attack does occur. And then lastly, give you a few pointers on where to go to get help, both if you've experienced a ransomware attack, but also where to learn more and where you should go from there. So a little bit about us before we get going. So as Jackie and I are both from Cynch Security, and Cynch has been around for a couple of years now. We established back in 2018 and was established by Susie Jones, my co-founder, and I, after working for a number of years in larger organizations in security and risk teams, with the sole purpose and really the goal to make it possible for businesses of any size to protect themselves and be safe and cyber resilient. What we identified at the time was there's a massive gap in the security industry in terms of supporting and helping small businesses. And so at Cynch, we are 100% dedicated towards helping small and micro businesses to deal with their cyber risks specifically. Instead of cyber security, we typically talk about cyber fitness. So from our perspective, instead of spending thousands or tens of thousands of dollars trying to put certain solutions in place or understand certain things, we've designed and built our business to help business owners take smaller steps as they have time and as they within their budget and to align to their constraints. So we call that cyber fitness. The goal really being to just gradually work on the cybersecurity of your business over time, and by doing that to increase the resilience of your business and protect yourself. We're very proud to have around 200 businesses on our platform now that we're working with every day. And certainly if you know any small businesses or you work within one yourself, we'd certainly encourage you to sign up and check it out. You can get started for free, and there's a whole bunch of different services and things that we can help you with down the track. So let's sort of focus to begin with on who's being targeted. So who are ransomware attackers going after at any point in time? The short answer is pretty much anyone they can get their hands on. They'll go after whatever they can. Short of being, I guess, Jim's mowing, which is still even a potentially juicy target for someone. Every business that's operating today is digital and online and likely to be a target for a ransomware attacker. More specifically, though, if you think about it, ransomware criminals or those that are attacking are really going after any businesses that have something of value. typically something sensitive or some sort of critical information. And so they'll look at and try to identify businesses to target that they believe have something of value, and more importantly, would be willing to pay to get it back if it was to disappear. In particular as well, we're seeing a lot of attacks going after regulated industries and regulated organizations, so universities, government departments, healthcare and hospitals, particularly last year, were quite specifically attacked for a whole bunch of different reasons. HR organizations and legal companies as well. And legal is an interesting one in particular, and other businesses that operate that way, because often they will be, there's quite sensitive or confidential information that they're handling. And so they may be willing to pay up really to just keep it quiet and to avoid anything getting out. Really, any business that trades on trust, and there's an element of that, a ransomware attacker will see them as a potential person who'd be willing to pay to avoid things getting out in the open that really shouldn't have happened in the first place. Another really key thing, which is really growing at the moment as well, is businesses that have a requirement around high availability or a need. So really anyone that fundamentally has to keep their systems online to be able to operate and stay alive are juicy targets for a cyber criminal when it comes to ransomware. So government agencies and medical facilities have been particularly targeted lately, as COVID-19 and the stuff that we're dealing with at the moment needs and requires that they're active and online and available. Hospitals in particular, really important and critical. And again, last year we saw some quite dramatic stuff around that space. And an interesting development that's been going on quite recently is that manufacturing and food and beverage companies are also being targeted. Again, quite fundamental and critical in the supply chain. There's lots of demand for their services. They're usually quite tight. They don't have lots of stock on hand. And so the disruption that a ransomware attack can cause can be quite dramatic. And as a result, criminals are going after and targeting them specifically as well. Similarly, logistics organizations, so Toll Group earlier this year and late last year were targeted for a similar reason as well. Any sort of availability, if there's a disruption in their business, can be quite dramatic. And so as a result, they'll be targeted with these types of attacks. And lastly, it's kind of counterintuitive, or it can be counterintuitive, but ransomware attackers will often target businesses that they suspect have got limited budgets when it comes to IT and cybersecurity. And the reason for that is that it's likely that we'll really have no other option than to pay the ransom to get back up and running. And so they'll target someone or a business that they believe is really more likely to pay, because if they don't pay, well, they don't have backups or they don't have any way of recovering. They're also usually a little bit easier to get into and attack in the first place. So the road to disaster, or how does a ransomware attack occur, and how does it actually eventuate and get into your business in the first place? So the first step for any sort of attack is going to be the research. So ransomware crews, as they're known, or attackers, in a lot of instances will have a dedicated team that are just there researching and trying to discover a target that they can go after. They'll look and leverage off things like the latest news, sorts of events that are going on to see, what sort of organizations or businesses are out there that are likely under stress or pressure and likely to be easier to get into from the outside. What they'll do is they'll either build their own list, or more often than not, they'll just go online to the darknet and buy a list of potential businesses or people that fall into these kind of categories, and they'll go off and use that in their campaigns to target. Once they have a list of targets or potential victims, they'll then leverage what they know about these businesses or organizations to then craft specific campaigns to target them. So they'll look at whatever things they can learn about you online through your social media accounts or through your website or anything that's publicly available. And they'll use that to tailor and customize the campaign out there. A lot of this is now automated, and there are services that they can subscribe to and pay for that will just run that operation for them. Again, they'll leverage off anything that's sort of newsworthy or clickable right now. So we've seen recently a lot of stuff around COVID-19 related scams and whatnot that are leading to ultimately some sort of a ransomware attack as well. But that'll change over time. So whatever's newsworthy at any point in time will become the hot the hot technique that they're using to actually get in and get into your email and get you to click on something, or to encourage you to take some sort of action that will lead to an event. Infiltration comes next. So once they've identified, once they've kind of got you hooked through some sort of social engineering attack, or trying to get you to do something for them, they'll then use that connection to then try to get into your environment and into your systems. So typically ransomware, the actual malicious software itself, or the dangerous thing that's going to run on your computer, is going to take advantage of latest vulnerabilities or unpatched security issues that might exist either in your environment. These, again, can be readily purchased online. There's not a lot of effort that they need to go into or go through to actually get going and start up nowadays. It's quite straightforward. Usually it will require or come in off the back of, say, a document that may have been attached in an email, or some sort of software that they've encouraged or somehow figured out how to get you to download as well. Another technique that they may use is just actually taking over your account. So we often find ransomware, or the technique, also works and is applied to cloud services. So they may go into your Dropbox account or into some other online account, take over that, change your password, lock you out of it, and then contact you to ransom that back to you again. Again, could happen with your email, or potentially any cloud service online as well. So it's another technique that they can use. But fundamentally what they'll do then is break into your environment, get some sort of a foothold or an access into that, and then run rampant and actually encrypt and lock things up. And that's where the ransom step comes in. So once they're in, what they'll do is they'll run some software in your environment or in the service that you've signed up to, or they'll do something within your computer. And what that will go through is it will do a number of different things. Primarily the goal is that they'll go in and lock you out of your data in some way, or your system. And so that could be done any number of different ways. It could be they may just delete it. It could be that they encrypt it and sort of lock it up so that without the key that you need to buy, that you can't get into it yourself. They may just go in and change the password or the account details to it so that you can't get into your computer potentially, or even your online account as well. Nowadays, what we're also finding that people are doing, it's becoming very common for criminals to do this, is because more people are getting a little bit prepared and backing their systems up and getting ready to actually recover. What they'll actually do is they'll take a copy of the files that they encrypt or lock up, take that somewhere else first, and then threaten to release that unless you pay them up front, and also use that as to drive and create a sense of urgency as well. And so this is becoming a more common practice. And so it used to be, when this first started, they would just go in and lock your files up, and then ideally you'd just get that back. But nowadays it's no longer just that your files are locked up. A copy of them is also being taken, and there's a potential issue if you don't actually deal with them or do something about the fact that information could get leaked or is now in the wrong hands as well. Typically the sorts of ransom requests can range. They're quite fluid. There's some that are tens of millions of dollars, but often for smaller organizations or individuals, it's usually around the $700 to $1,500 mark. So something, ideally, they'll be targeting you with a ransom demand that is going to be something that you could ideally get access to or pay fairly readily without too much of an issue. And we actually find that they'll tailor that as well to the nation that they're going after. So in Australia, we're sort of known as being reasonably affluent around the world. And so the sorts of ransoms that we get demanded are going to be higher than someone else internationally, potentially. And so they're quite sophisticated and can be quite savvy in that instance. All of this, at the end of the day, from their perspective, is a business operation. And so they'll aim to operate that as effectively and efficiently and profitably as they possibly can. So if you do fall victim to a ransomware attack, it's likely you'll get some sort of a letter or a ransom demand. So here's an example of a recent one that's popped up. What the letter will do is a number of things. You may discover it anywhere on your system. Sometimes it'll be on your desktop. Sometimes it will take over your entire screen and you can't do anything without actually engaging with it. But ultimately what the letter or the ransom demand will do is it will give you a little bit of an explanation of what's happened. it will create some sense of urgency, so get you to try to react and deal with this thing as opposed to ignoring and hoping that it just goes away. So they'll create a sense of urgency as though locking up all of your data so you can't get into it isn't urgent enough. They'll then make it seem as though paying them is your only option. So, you know, back in the day when you watch the movies, it's like, don't call the police, you know, something's going to go wrong. They'll try to do something similar so that it feels as though the only option that you do have is to pay them. Otherwise, everything's gone. They'll make you feel as comfortable as possible paying them as well. So you'll see in this example here that they talk about, you know, that they're a professional operation. This is a business to them. They want to make it you feel comfortable that giving them your money is going to get you what you expect it to get you. They'll also potentially offer a way to prove the fact that they're legitimate. So they may offer to decrypt a file for you to prove that they have and can give you access to things. Again, making it you feel as comfortable as possible handing over your money to them. And then finally, they'll share some details about how to actually do that. So typically that will be by going and procuring some cryptocurrency, Bitcoin or some description, and then transferring it to some account or some wallet that they have, which with a few other instructions on how to do that. They'll even kind of give you some guidance on how to download anonymous web browsers and things to make that possible. This message specifically is from the ransomware group that was also responsible for Toll's attack last year. And since just March, they've actually been made, at least as that we know of, at least another sort of $25 million based on this type of attack as well. So this one is a particularly sort of sophisticated attack, but the techniques and the sorts of messages and things that you'd be expected to do in a small business context are largely no different. It's just the potential number of computers affected and therefore the costs associated with sort of recovering and dealing with stuff is scaled appropriately. This one is going out there at the moment specifically using coronavirus or COVID-19 related techniques. So they're sending a lot of spam and trying to get into organizations using all sorts of stuff related to the fact that we're all working remotely and other things associated with that right now. The really interesting thing, and this one is particularly guilty for that situation where they'll take a copy of your files and then ransom you further beyond just getting your data back, but also the chances or the threat of you losing that information being disclosed publicly as well. It's also particularly dangerous, this one, because it will go in and disable your antivirus before it goes and does anything, and it's quite effective at doing that. And as of right now, there's no known weaknesses in it. So right now, if you were to get locked up or fall victim to this particular attack, really your only option is to recover your data in some way. There's not at this stage any way for you to decrypt the information using a tool or any other technique that's known about. One thing, once they've explained how to pay them, they'll be very good. As we said, it operates as a business, and so they'll be quite active in trying to do that. And they actually have some fairly sophisticated and effective support services that you can that you engage with as you go through that. So in recent weeks, actually, some of the conversations going back and forth between ransomware attackers and their victims were released publicly. And they're quite helpful. They'll come in, they'll explain and give you a bit of guidance on what to do. They'll even negotiate a special price, and so they'll have experts that will go in and negotiate and come up with a business deal to make sure that your data is back and that you're willing to pay as much as possible. And in this example, they'll even actually go through and give you a few security pointers in terms of some stuff that you could do to avoid the same thing happening to you in the future as well. So really a full service operation, getting bang for buck here, one would argue, in getting your money back, your data back. But really whilst it's such an effective and lucrative operation for them, so they can afford and they have become quite sophisticated and quite effective at operating these types of scams and attacks as well. So you're really up against, when it comes to ransomware, once it's in it, it's quite a challenging environment and an operation to deal with. Really importantly, though, what is been sort of shown in studies is that by paying the ransom, so whilst whilst these ransomware crews will potentially give you access to your data back. Paying the ransom itself, those that do turn out to actually be spending more on recovering from these types of attacks than if they didn't pay the ransom. And so interestingly, it's observed that around about 30% of the time, you may not even get your information back even after you've paid them. And so really what's in their interest to give you the money back or to give you your data back, once they have your money in hand. It's quite interesting that, sometimes there's no guarantee and it's quite often that you may hand over your money, it's gone, and then there's really no recourse. You've still lost your data anyway. And then even if you do pay, then there's still the process of you going through and fixing and cleaning up all of the computers that have been impacted on that. You still need to notify anyone that's been impacted of that if there's potentially sensitive information specifically. If there's been a privacy breach, you need to go through the motions on that. If there's just been a disruption in your business, there's all of the fallout from that as well. So all of the costs associated with ransomware are still there. The recovery of the information might be worthwhile in some scenarios. It's really not that great though. And so it's really, really advisable to avoid paying the ransom wherever possible. If not for no other reason, then you're actually funding criminals as well. So really they're going to take your money and just parlay that into the next attack that they run against the next poor business that's out there as well. The other really important thing to keep in mind if you do pay a ransom is that you're actually signaling to the ransomware community that you're willing to pay. And so the likelihood that you get targeted in a future attack is going to be increased as well. So then on the other side of that, you're going to need to really protect yourself and be quite mindful of that. And hence why it's really not a good idea to pay the ransom. Wherever possible, you should avoid doing that. So to protect yourself and avoid having to pay a ransom, you really need to go through the motions of putting some stuff in place to keep your business secure. So the first thing to really think about is how to prevent the ransom getting in or that social engineering step from taking place. So really both yourself and your team pausing and verifying and really slowing down a little bit and thinking about what you're engaging with when it comes to emails, websites, software, whatever it might be, any sort of way that it might get in. So be mindful and kind of aware of the latest scams and the sorts of phishing emails that are around there. Make sure that your team is aware of that sort of stuff too. Slow down and think before you're clicking and verify anything that's going on. And really, it's really important to verify anything suspicious. So emails, phone calls that might come through, websites that you might find yourself visiting. Just really be quite interested about and cautious of what's going on out there. Protecting your data and your systems. Really, it's important to, whilst some of the new ransomware tools and things will actually disable antivirus, it's still a quite effective technique, and certainly in smaller businesses, it's really important that you do and you are running antivirus in your environment. Also ensure, and as I mentioned earlier, the way that many of these attacks will work is leveraging off vulnerabilities that might exist in the software that you're running. So really make sure that you're running the latest security patches and updates, both in your operating system, but also the applications that you're running. One technique that they'll use is in a document that might get attached in an Office document. So typically they'll use something called macros within a document. So it's really worthwhile and important to disable that wherever possible, both on any machine that might be operating or connected into your business. And also look for ways to increase the security of your cloud services. So if someone was to go after one of your cloud services, it's important to make sure that you've got a strong password on anything that's going on, you've got multi-factor authentication enabled, and a whole bunch of other bits and pieces, and you're aware of sort of how things work within that cloud environment to make sure that that's been well protected as well and as secure as it can be against a ransomware attack. Really, the most important thing, though, to think about when it comes to ransomware is ensuring that you can recover your data if it disappears. I mean, it's good practice anyway from a business perspective, but fundamental when it comes to dealing with ransomware. And so make sure that you do have your backups running. Make sure that they're working. Often backups one of those things we put in place, we just forget about it. So it's important to go in and check for that to happen, that it's happening. Ideally, you have a backup that's running daily as well. So it shouldn't just be something that happens once a week. The risk is that if ransomware gets in and takes something out, you've lost an entire week, a month, or basically however long since your last backup. So really have a look at that and make sure that you're quite comfortable that you can afford to lose that sort of information. Ideally, you want to also make sure that that backup is taken offline or offsite, and so that it's not available or accessible from the computer that's been attacked by ransomware. So once ransomware gets into your environment, it's going to do as much as possible to go and destroy whatever data it can get access to. And if your backup is connected to the computer that's fallen victim to ransomware, your backups are gone as well. So when you're looking at your backups and checking them over, make sure, and don't just think about the one that's there in the office or connected to your computer. Go off and check to see where the copies of that have been taken, and also think about how long it's been since that copy was taken somewhere else and disconnected from the important system that was backed up in the first place. Ideally, you want to keep those backups for a little while as well. 90 days is best practice, but again, you need to think about, well, if I miss or if a system goes down and gets corrupted in my environment and I need to go back a few days because, we need to go off and explore, or you've backed it up or it was sitting in there, something happened a week ago, you really need to think about how long can or should I be storing my backups so that I'm going to be able to get the right information back exactly when I need it. And really, finally, on backups, make sure that you can restore them. So it's important. It's great to make sure that the copies have been taken, but don't forget that at some stage you're probably going to have to recover from those. Ideally, you don't want to be trying to figure that out in a crisis. So do a test about that. Figure out and go through the motions of actually recovering your data so that you can be confident when something does happen that you'll be able to get back. Lastly, whilst recovering your data if ransomware happens is one really important step. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that you're going to need to think about and deal with in that moment of crisis when an attack has occurred as well. So if you haven't already, it's think about and start to develop an incident response plan. Be ready and understand who you're going to contact or need to get a hold of to help you to deal with the situation. There's a whole bunch of people that you're probably going to need to want to call on. So make sure that you have a plan, that you understand what's in that plan, and that the details of who you're going to need to contact are captured in there as well. Make sure that your team is aware of that as well. So it's important, useful for you to have the plan, but it's also important for the entire team to understand what their responsibilities are and how they need to behave and engage with that plan too. There is a bunch of places that you'll need to go to get help. And again, these are ones that you may want to consider included in your plan if you have one or you're developing one. Before you go looking at or contacting any of these services, though, there's an important couple of steps you should be thinking about putting in place or following if you do find that a ransomware attack has occurred in your business. So firstly, disconnect any of the devices that have fallen victim from your network. That hopefully will stop the spread of it going any further. It's not by any stretch of the imagination the only thing that you need to do, but it's an important first step is just disconnecting anything that's been attacked. Contact your IT support provider if you haven't already. It's likely to be the first thing that you'll want to do, and it's an important thing that you get the IT support provider in. But also think about and consider contacting your insurer. So cyber insurance is in particular a really useful thing in these types of scenarios, and potentially if you have a cyber insurance policy that can be give you access to some really fantastic expertise and really help you to deal with this type of an incident. So consider looking into cyber insurance if you haven't already, and make sure that you're ready to contact them if an incident does occur too. Now on the screen here, you'll see a few other people that you can engage with or a few other organizations that are worthwhile contacting depending on your situation. The first is the No More Ransom Project. So this is a joint initiative between law enforcement and the security industry, and they will publish any decryption tools or things that you can use to actually get your data back if they're known and available. So some of the more recent or current attacks, it may be challenging, or they may not have a tool for that. But if you do have some data that's been encrypted at some stage using ransomware, then potentially you can come back and grab a tool from their website down the track, and that'll allow you to get access to that data. They also have a lot of great general advice that's worth reviewing and looking into as well if you're concerned about this particular space. So the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, their cyber.gov.au website for Australians is also fantastic and really important if you do fall victim to a ransomware attack, actually any cyber attack. You should consider reporting it through that website. And there's a number of different reasons why you should report it. Firstly, they will triage that and ideally give you some recommendations on some additional steps that you may need to take, or put you in contact with someone that might be able to help if it's appropriate. But also it raises the alarm and increases awareness that these types of attacks have happened or are happening, and then they can take steps from a sort of government Australia-wide perspective to try to avoid other organisations falling victim to the same sort of thing. And the last one on the screen there is ID Care. So they're a non-profit that run out of Queensland, and they provide support to cybercrime and identity theft victims, primarily community members or individuals within Australia and New Zealand. So they are another good option to call if you're a little bit lost or unsure in the event of a crisis or an incident, and you might want to consider calling them to figure out, how to respond, and or also to just get a little bit of support as an individual as well, particularly if this happens to you personally and it's not necessarily in a business context. And then lastly is us, so Cynch. So as a small business focused cybersecurity company, we can offer and help a lot of stuff. We're not necessarily, we support our members if they do fall victim to an attack of some description, but primarily we provide services to help you to address all of the stuff that we've covered here, plus a range of other bits and pieces as well. And so recently we've actually just launched this week our 6-week cyber bootcamp program, completely online. You can sign up and go through that at your own leisure. And it covers and provides some more detailed and, more importantly, specific recommendations around this, plus a whole range of other concern areas for small business that are tailored to your business. So it's not just necessarily the general stuff that you would find on, say, No More Ransom or on the cyber.gov.au website. We actually tailor the program so that it's specific to the specific technologies you use within your business or the particular concerns that you may have as well. You'll see that we actually include and we can cover off a whole bunch of different things. And for a limited time, we're actually offering that for free on our website. So if you are interested, please encourage you to go to our website, look for the Cyber Bootcamp link, go through, sign up. You'll get access to that for 6 weeks. And also you'll be able to sort of contact and work with us, continuing to address any other concerns that might be popping up within your business. And I think we're on time. So I think I've made it to 30 minutes. We've made it to the end. Is there a couple of questions pop up there, Jackie? Anything?
Yes, there have been a few questions. Thanks, Adam, for that. The first question is, does cyber insurance cover ransomware? I think you covered that, but maybe you can give a quick answer.
Yeah, it depends. So it can cover certain ransomware, and it's really important to check your policy. So if ransomware is a concern that something that you are concerned about in a business, you should definitely check your policy, talk to your broker or whoever it is that you get an insurance through, and check to see if you are covered sufficiently for that. There are things that can be covered, even potentially paying the ransom itself, although we always discourage that. But the insurer and whoever you work with on that would help to negotiate that. But really important to check over your policy, see what's included or not included, or what's not included. And if you don't, or if you aren't sure if you have cyber insurance, just check for that first. But also, yeah, just check it out. It's definitely a worthwhile investment, particularly for small businesses.
Thank you. There's another question here on, does ransomware affect mobiles?
That's a good question. So we mentioned earlier, there's sort of account that you can have your data locked up. So it is possible for your mobile to be ransomed. It's not typically they download some piece of software and do that. On Androids, it could certainly happen where some sort of malicious software could come in and lock you out of your information. In an iPhone scenario, it's more likely that you'll find your Apple account taken over, and then potentially your passcode changed and or you locked out of your device, and then you may find that will get ransomed back to you as well. It's not nowhere near as common as ransomware going into desktop environments and all servers and splatting all your data in that way. But it's certainly a concern. But really the main protection against that is going to be all the stuff that you should really be doing around protecting your mobile, and importantly, those accounts that have control over your mobile, like your Apple ID or your Google Play Store account as well.
Thank you, Adam. If there's any other questions, you can put that in the chat, or you can take yourself off mute and ask the question.
Anything I missed, Jackie? There was a fair bit we covered off.
I think you covered everything. Well done. Well, there's
All
no
right.
other questions. We can close the webinar now. Thank you very much for joining us. If you think of any other questions, though, please send us an email. I sent the meeting invite out, so you have my contact details if you would like to reach out. And obviously, you can visit our website here, which is on the screen at the moment. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, everyone, for coming.